Salutations and welcome, friends, to another special episode of Trust the Profits. My name is Matthew DeSantis. You can find me on Twitter at the handle at Failed to Menace. Now, today we have a very special episode where we are going to be talking about pedigree as it relates to the Kentucky Derby. Always, I think, a hot topic for conversation. How much does pedigree impact the ability for these furlongs to do the 10 furlongs of the Kentucky Derby, go that mile and a quarter? So always a fun topic of conversation. Before we get into that, make sure to press that subscribe button here on YouTube to get all of our content that we have for you on Trust the Profits, whether it's about the Kentucky Derby, whether it's about the Kentucky Oaks, whether it's about other graded stakes racing, live betting Thursday night at Evangeline Downs, etc. We have you covered coast to coast, international. We have something for everybody, so make sure to press that subscribe button. Additionally, make sure to press the like button on this video. Always helps us spread the word. And additionally, comment below with maybe what's your favorite pedigree in this particular Kentucky Derby field, or maybe you think it's all hocus pocus and it's just about what the horses do on the track. So let us know one way or the other what you think. But here to join me is a very special guest who's coming back to Trust the Profits, and that is pedigree expert Jessica Tugwell. Jessica, thank you so much for joining me. And I just have to say that during the Derby season, I have so appreciated the blogs that you've been writing and all the things that you've been doing, because you've been trying to get a sense of the pulse, I think, of the horse racing public of which horses are people interested in learning more about. So thank you so much for joining me. And, I'd imagine you're looking forward to this Kentucky Derby.
Oh yeah, thank you so much for having me, Matthew. I'm very excited for the Derby. It should be a good time. It's always a great race. I've got some pedigrees that I like, some horses that have just impressed me with what they've done on the track, and it should be fun.
Yeah. Well, like I said, make sure to check out Jessica's blog, and also make sure to check out all the great work she does for Little Bluebird Stables as well. Well, let's start off with a big picture question, and that is, coming into the 149th running of the Kentucky Derby, how much, in your opinion, does pedigree matter in terms of this race, or maybe just in terms of these horses getting to this race?
Generally, honestly, I don't think it matters a whole lot once they're there. I think that, generally every horse in the Kentucky Derby has something about their pedigree that works. For instance, people have talked in the past about the lesser bred Kentucky Derby winners in recent memory, horses like Medina Spirit, who was disqualified, but still crossed the wire first, being by Protonico. You've got California Chrome. People were saying, oh, he's a cow bred. That's not going to work. But there are things for both of them that really did work in their pedigree when you look at it at a deeper level. So I think that in this year's race, there's just really nice pedigrees across the board. So
yeah, absolutely. So I'm interested. You were just speaking a little bit. This kind of transitions into the next question I wanted to ask. You kind of mentioned horses that maybe had lesser pedigree who had crossed the finish line first in the past. And I'm wondering if there was a horse that you've seen on the Derby trail or that's in this particular field that you think maybe has outrun their pedigree a little bit, or maybe has surprised you with how well they performed to this point.
not really, honestly. All of them really this year have a lot going for them. There are a lot of horses who have immediate stakes in the family. There are no real obscure sires of anybody in the field except for perhaps the Japanese horses. But even then, that's more just in the context of the American public. So there's not really a lot of any of them that I think were like, wow, where did he come from? Let me take a look. What worked there? Like it was with Medina Spirit was one where I was like, why does that work? And then looked a little deeper and it was, okay, I see what was going on here.
Yeah.
But there's no one like that this year.
Well, speaking of those immaculate pedigrees, we have 5 sires who have multiple horses in this particular race. And so those 5 sires are Curlin, Into Mischief, Candy Ride. Those 3, I think everybody knows a little bit about, even if you maybe don't follow pedigree that much. But 2 relatively newer sires, Good Magic and Violence, also have multiple runners in this field. Violence, of course, has the likely morning line favorite Forte in as a progeny. I'm interested in particularly Good Magic and Violence because they are newer names. Do you expect a lot from these? Because I've seen some people say, listen, I can't bet on a Violence horse. I can't bet on a Good Magic horse until I see them do it in the Triple Crown. Do you have that hesitation to see, can they actually come through in this 10 furlong plus distance? Or do you just expect, particularly with Good Magic being a progeny of Curlin, do you expect that kind of Curlin magic and certainly with Violence, do you expect that class to be able to continue in the Triple Crown races?
I think so. I definitely understand some of the concerns about violence, in particular, that his offspring getting 10 furlongs. But for the ones in question, I don't think there's that much. I don't think the distance will be what gets them.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we'll definitely see more of his offspring in the Triple Crown moving forward. I think that both of them, I think they will both continue to have an impact on the Triple Crown series. And Good Magic in particular, I think we're going to see that they'll do well going longer, and we'll continue to see them succeeding. I like them both as stallions, and I think they both are going to, this is just kind of the tip of the iceberg in the beginning for them.
Yeah, that's always great. I feel like Gunrunner has sucked up a lot of the air in this conversation as like the champion sire early on. But yeah, it's very interesting. And the other things that's interesting is a horse like Bolt Doro was very precocious coming out as a 2-year-old in terms of his offspring in that first crop. It does seem like his first crop is struggling getting the distance and is much better suited for the sprinters in this particular field. Certainly a horse like Corona Bolt for Brad Cox cutting back and becoming a stakes champion sprinting. But it is interesting to see their evolution. But yeah, Good Magic and Violence. I mean, both those horses have really turned out some great offspring this year. I am interested, I know you've commented on this horse a little bit before, and this is maybe a little bit of a curveball question, but one of the pedigrees that I think has gotten a ton of buzz is Practical Move. With the Practical Joke sire, and I mean tons of questions like this horse shouldn't even like 9 furlongs, let alone 10. What are your thoughts on Practical Move? I know you're not particularly high on this horse, but I'm just interested in kind of what your impressions are of him as a horse and maybe that pedigree a little bit.
Yeah, Practical Move to me is just he's really hard for me to get a read on. I visually in his races, he doesn't seem to settle. Like he's coming from off the pace, but his jockey's always holding him. He's always he seems like he's constantly like a high energy, dry burning type of horse who's always on go. And that combined with the fact that he's by Practical Joke is definitely a concern for the distance. If he was a horse who relaxed easily, even if he was on the lead, if he was one who just kind of went out there, ears flicking, just kind of did his thing, I wouldn't be quite as concerned. He does have some stamina on the bottom. He's out of a mare by a Fleet Alex, so of course won the Belmont. So that's an example for me of where, he could potentially overcome the pedigree because he's clearly a very talented horse. And I think, though, that it's likely that 9 furlongs is going to be about his limit because mostly of the way he runs. And then a little bit also because there's already distance questions with the pedigree, kind of a little bit of both where the pedigree makes you wonder. And then when you look at how he runs, it's kind of, oh, I'm not so sure.
Yeah. Now that's a great point about how he runs, because you're right. He is a very energetic horse. And he's also a horse. I think a lot of people have pointed this out. Our own Colin Sheehan here on Trust the Prophets did a video breakdown of this. Is a horse that loves to hug the inside rail too, and has saved every single inch of ground going that 9 furlongs. So, that's a horse, if he draws post position 14 or something like that, could have a really tough time making the trip that he wants in the Kentucky Derby. So you brought this point up earlier, and listen, I will fully admit, anybody who's been watching this channel, I am an unabashed fan of Derma Sotogake and Continuar. I am all in on the Japanese train. I've seen them win too many international competitions. I've learned more about their breeding processes over there. I think they're coming for this Triple Crown, and it's just a matter of when, not if. But for people who are not familiar with Japan and Derma Sotogake and Continuar on these pedigrees, can you shed a little light on those two horses and maybe just in general the Japanese breeding operations and kind of what we can expect from those pedigrees? I think everybody knows, there's Sunday Silence in everybody's background, but maybe a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm really hadn't dug into them until just a couple days ago, I started digging into them, particularly Derma Sotogake and Continuar. And it's super interesting because they're both by American stallions who were sprinters here. You have Mind Your Biscuits is the sire of Derma Sotogake, and Dreyfong, the Breeders' Cup Sprint winner, is the sire of Continuar. But in both cases, there's a lot of stamina on the bottom. And I think that's something that you see a lot in the Japanese breeding is the mixing of speed over stamina or stamina over speed. And they both, I think I don't worry about the distance with either of them, despite the fact that they're by sprinters. Derma Sotogake's Dam won the Kanto Oaks at 2,100 meters, and Mind Your Biscuits already has a stakes winner in Japan going 10 furlongs. So there's not so much concern. And that stakes winner is by a King Kamehameha mare, if I'm not mistaken. Or that was the other horse. I'm so sorry.
No. It's all right.
That was Drefong has a stakes winner going in the 2000 guineas in the Satsuki show out of a King Kamehameha mare. So that is the same cross as Continuar. That was my mistake there.
No.
But Mind Your Biscuits also does have a stakes winner going 10 furlongs just from a different sire line. And then Continuar's pedigree, his dam is 3/4 sister to the Japanese filly Triple Crown winner and horse of the year Almond Eye.
Oh, yeah.
And goes back to a very big female family. His fifth dam is also the ancestress of Belmont Stakes winners Rags to Riches and Jazzle.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So there's tons of stamina on the bottom in his pedigree as well.
See, that's great that's great information to know. And I think that it is, I think what we saw last year with Crown Pride, I think has somehow shaded what people think of these Japanese horses and I think also what happened in the UAE Derby with Derma Sotogake going out to the lead and wiring the field. I think a lot of people just assumed, oh, it's Crown Pride Part 2. It's just another, horse that's going to flash front speed, etc. But like you said, there's a lot of stamina there. And when you watch Derma Sotogake and Continuar's races, they both seem like horses that get stronger as the race goes on. They often come from off the pace too.
Yeah, exactly.
That UAE Derby was a bit of a fluke in terms of Sotogake being there on the lead. So that's really interesting and I think very helpful to think about. And I encourage people to learn a little bit more about that Japanese breeding operation and just pay attention to all those brood mares and stallions that they're bringing over from the United States, because I think that kind of tells you, like you said, the speed over stamina over speed sort of discussion. So we talked a little bit about horses' performances and how, by the time they get here, we kind of know what horse they are. But there are two horses in particular in this race that I'm interested in whether or not pedigree would be an important factor or something you lean on. And the two I'm thinking of in particular are Mage and Kingsbarns, because those two horses only have 3 career races before they've come here to the Kentucky Derby. So there's just not as much of a past performance to really go on. I mean, it's very light. And so for those two, do you lean a little bit more on pedigree when you're looking at them, or, because they're still so young in some ways, or at least inexperienced?
A little bit, just a little bit more than you might otherwise. They both, for what it's worth, they both are bred really well. We know Uncle Mo has already gotten a Kentucky Derby winner in Nyquist, and his dam is a graded stakes placed winner who's a half to a grade 1 winner. And same kind of thing going with Mage. He is, a grandson of Curlin who ran in the Kentucky Derby in his 4th start, I believe it was, and ran 3rd, was a good race. And his dam is a stakes winner and was graded stakes place at 9 furlongs and is a half sister to Finnegan's Wake. So there isn't a whole lot of worries there for stamina on either horse. And I think that there's also indications that they should be talented based on the performance of their immediate family.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, certainly two very precocious horses, right out the gate, showing a lot of talent and a lot of ability in this one. Well, Jessica, I really appreciate your insights into pedigree as we think through this year's Kentucky Derby. And one of the things, I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit. I didn't let you know this ahead of time, but, we're asking all of our guests kind of who do they like maybe a little bit in this year's Kentucky Derby. Obviously, post positions aren't drawn by the time we're recording this yet, so that could obviously throw a big curveball in this. But as you're sitting here today, Thursday, April 27th, as we record, what are your thoughts on who do you like in the Kentucky Derby, or maybe who's your top 3 or something like that?
I've got 2 that
that's better than me right now.
I'm going to end up playing on Derby Day. I had a future wager in the first pool on Forte.
Okay.
I love his pedigree. I love his female family. Going back to his 10th dam, it's a bit deep. But you have horses such as Kentucky Derby winners Super Saver, Smarty Jones, Sea Hero, and Go for Gin. Wow. And you also have Kentucky Derby runner-ups, Easygoer, Bluegrass Cat, and Bimelech, who nobody has really heard of Bimelech, but he was a huge favorite in the 1940 Kentucky Derby and got beaten by a big long shot and ended up being champion 3-year-old that year. So he was a nice one.
Listen, there's not many horse racing shows that talk about Bimelech, but we're here to talk about Bimelech today.
Bimelech is really underrated. People should
justice for Bimelech, and love it. And so that's Forte. Who's your other horse that you're looking at?
2 Phils.
I
Two
love
Phils
it.
is the other
Oh,
one who I really like. I love
yeah.
he has a really fun breeding pattern where he is from the same female family as his sire Hardspun,
Yeah.
which I think is very interesting about him. And he's the one who's really just watching his races. It was actually after he finished behind Angel of Empire
Oh, yeah.
when
And the
he
Risen
caught my
Star.
eye in the Risen Star, yes, that he
Yeah.
caught my eye for the first time. And I was like, you know what? This horse really has just been doing a lot of good. And I actually put up a poll on Twitter about should I talk about Angel of Empire or Two Phils? Because I really want to talk about Two Phils. And it was like, okay, I guess I have to talk about the winner. But it worked out because he ended up winning the Spiral and I could come back and write about him anyway.
Yeah, yeah. No, and he is it's funny, he's a horse I really like a lot. And he is a horse that reminds me, not necessarily in terms of pedigree, but in terms of performance, a horse that reminds me a lot of one of my favorite horses ever, Simplification last year, who he just seems like a horse that just always gives an honest effort. He actually finished first, second, and third in his 3 prep races, which is exactly what Simplification did last year. And before that, Simplification won the Mucho Macho Man. What did Two Phils do? He won the Street Sense. Very similar sort of patterns to get here. And what did Simplification do? Kind of run up and hit the Superfecta in 4th place last year. So I have a feeling Two Phils is sitting on a big race. Obviously, we just saw his workout at Hawthorne. That just got dropped recently and looked great out there on the track. So he's a horse I'm really excited about. And now that I know you're on him, it gives me a little bit more confidence to be on him.
Yeah, hopefully that's not too much weight for him. But yeah, I really like Two Phils.
Awesome. Well, Jessica, thank you again so much for joining me. And like I said, make sure to check out Jessica on Twitter. Make sure to check out all the stuff she's doing for Little Bluebird Stables as well, and her blog. It's really great content. And if you want in-depth analysis of pedigree, this is where you got to go. So Jessica, thank you again so much for joining me. Really appreciate it, and enjoy the Kentucky Derby. And for all of you out there, make sure to press that like button, subscribe to Trust the Profits. And until next time, my name is Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great and profitable day at the races and reminding you that it's now post time.